In this guide, we will walk through the process of merging two arrays into a single array while automatically removing any duplicates. Power Automate offers a useful function called union, which makes this process simple. This guide will explain every step in detail, assuming you're starting from scratch. What is an array and why merge them? An array in Power Automate is simply a list of items. Each item in an array is an object, meaning it contains a set of related data. For example, an array might contain data about people, products, or any other items where each object represents a single record. Merging two arrays means combining the contents of both arrays into one. However, when working with data from different sources, you might encounter duplicate records, meaning the same record appears more than once. The objective here is to merge two arrays while automatically removing those duplicates, ensuring the final merged array only contains unique records. To start, you'll need to create a new flow in Power Automate. This flow will be designed to merge two arrays while eliminating any duplicate entries. First, go to Power Automate, log into your account, and create a new flow. When prompted, choose to create an instant cloud flow. This option is useful for testing purposes as it allows you to manually trigger the flow. For the sake of this guide, we'll call the flow Merge Arrays Removing Duplicates. Once the flow has been created, the next step is to define the two arrays that will be merged. We use compose actions to store and manage data. A compose action is a simple way of storing static data that can be used throughout the flow. Add a compose action and name it Array1. In the input field for this action, you'll paste the data for the first array. This data is a list of objects, where each object represents a record containing information like ID, name, and age. Notice that both arrays contain a record for John Doe with the same ID, 1. This is intentional, as we will use this data to test the functionality of the union function, which is designed to eliminate duplicates. With both arrays defined in the compose actions, the next step is to merge the arrays into a single array while removing duplicates. To do this, we'll use the union function. The union function in Power Automate is a built-in function that combines two arrays into one, while ensuring that any duplicate objects across the arrays are removed. To merge the arrays, add another compose action and name it Union Arrays. In the input section of this action, you'll need to use an expression that calls the union function. The expression looks like this: union of outputs, array 1 and outputs array 2. Here's how this works. The outputs, array 1, and outputs, array 2, refer to the outputs of the previous compose actions. The union function compares the data in both arrays and combines them into one, but it only keeps unique objects. So even though both array 1 and array 2 contain the record for John Doe, with id 1, only one instance of this record will appear in the final result, because it is identical in both arrays. The union function works by comparing each object across both arrays. If two objects are identical, meaning they have the same field values across all properties, only one will remain in the merged array. If the objects have different data in any field, both objects will be included in the merged result. With everything set up, you can now run the flow to test if it works as expected. Save the flow and trigger it manually to see the result. After running the flow, this should display the merged array without any duplicates. For example, based on the input arrays above, the output should look like this. As you can see, the union function ensures that no duplicate records are included. based on exact match of all fields in the objects. All unique elements from both arrays are retained in the final merged array. The union function is ideal when combining data from different sources, and you want to ensure no data repetition. It efficiently handles the removal of duplicates while keeping all the unique records intact. The union function is extremely useful when you need to merge two arrays and automatically eliminate duplicate entries. It works by comparing the objects in both arrays. If two objects are identical, meaning they have the same values for every property, the union function will only keep one of those objects. If the objects are different in any way, both will appear in the final merged array. This function is particularly valuable when you're working with data from multiple sources, and you want to ensure that no records are repeated in the final dataset. For instance, if you're merging customer records from two different systems, the union function will ensure that if a customer appears in both systems, they will only appear once in the merged list. When working with the union function in Power Automate, it's important to follow a few best practices to ensure your flow is efficient and reliable. First, always name your actions clearly, so it's easy to understand what each step does. In this flow, we used names like Array 1, Array 2, and Union arrays to make it clear which actions are performing which tasks. Next, make sure that the objects in both arrays have a consistent structure. If the objects in one array have different fields or missing properties compared to the other array, the union function might not work as expected. Consistency is key to ensuring that the comparison works correctly. However, if any property in an object is different, even if the objects have the same ID or other fields, the union function will treat them as distinct objects. Let's walk through an example to explain this in more detail. Modified example with changed object property. Let's assume that Array 1 and Array 2 are as follows, but with the name property removed from the object, what happens when we run the union function? Now, when we apply the union function to these two arrays, here's the important point. The ID property is the same in both objects. Both have id 1. But because one object in Array 2 is missing the name property, Power Automate will treat these as two distinct objects. Even though the objects represent the same real-world entity, the absence of the name field in Array 2 makes the objects different in the eyes of the union function. The resulting merged array after applying the union function will look like this. Explanation of why this happens. Even though both objects have the same ID, the union function, sees them as different objects because one of the objects in Array 2 lacks the name property. This missing property changes the structure of the object, so the union function considers it a completely different entry. As a result, two separate objects are retained in the merged array, each with the same ID but with different sets of properties. Key points to understand. Exact object comparison. The union function compares objects based on all their properties. If two objects have identical property names and values, they are considered duplicates, and only one is kept in the final merged array. Differences in object properties. If any property differs between the objects, even if the other properties are identical, the function treats the objects as distinct and retains both in the merged array. In the case above, removing the name property from the object in Array 2 causes the union function to treat it as a new object. What can we do to avoid this issue? To avoid this scenario and ensure that the union function works as expected, treating records with the same ID as duplicates even if some properties are missing or modified, we must ensure consistency in the structure of the objects across both arrays. If you want to merge arrays based on just the ID field, ignoring other differences, you could. Standardize the objects. Before running the union function, ensure that the objects in both arrays have the same structure, with the same fields in the same order. This can be done by adding missing properties to objects in either array or by using a select action to shape the data into a consistent format. Use additional logic. If necessary, you can add more sophisticated logic to handle cases where some fields might be missing. For example, you could use a condition to check if the name field is missing and then add a default value to make the objects more comparable. It's also a good idea to test your flow with various data scenarios. This might include arrays where some records are identical across arrays, others where records are completely different, or cases where only part of the records overlap. Testing ensures that your flow handles all edge cases properly. Finally, always validate the final output. After using union, check the merged array to ensure that it contains only unique records and that no data has been accidentally omitted. By following these steps, you've successfully created a flow that merges two arrays while removing any duplicates. The union function made this process simple and efficient. With careful testing and validation, you can be confident that your flow will work correctly, no matter how complex the data. This approach is ideal for situations where you need to consolidate data from multiple sources and ensure that duplicates are removed automatically.